Welcome back to another episode of The Next Step, the podcast where we share real stories of resilience, adaptation, and overcoming life's challenges with limb loss. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, and I'm a bilateral amputee myself. And today we're diving into a story of strength, survival, and transformation. My guest today is Carolyn Buffington. While she is not an amputee, she has gone through an incredible medical journey that drastically changed her life. Once an avid runner and hiker, Carolyn was diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer that led to a complex surgery, leaving her with a mega prosthesis in her leg. Despite the odds, she has found a way to adapt, stay active, and connect with others in similar situations. Carolyn, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you joining us. I've been anxious to talk to you.
Well, thank you. It's very, very nice to be here with you, Kevin. Thanks.
Yeah, well, listen, we normally have amputees on the call, and you're not really an amputee, but you are sort of an amputee. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, but what I want to do is just kind of step back and talk about how your life was before you had problems with your leg. You were an avid runner and a hiker. Can you just kind of talk to me about what life was like before you got sick, before you got anything done to your leg and whatnot?
Well, I retired from my position as an attorney with the federal government at the end of 2018. So, and I discovered my illness in 2 years ago. So I had several years under my belt of being retired, and I was settling into that. I'd always been physically active. I always had a gym membership downtown, and I would work out at lunch. And when I retired from my job, I retired from the gym, but I did something athletic, something physical every day. Light running. I had to give up the heavy running a while ago for some back issues, nothing major. But I loved, loved, loved to hike and walk. And we live in a wooded area, so I have many opportunities to just walk out my front door and go on a beautiful walk.
Nice. And you do that daily, you said.
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, without fail. Maybe if it was pouring down rain or icy, I wouldn't, but I generally, it was truly my thing to do. I like to identify wildflowers, and I just really appreciate nature and being outside and feeling the air on my skin is it's what it was my thing. It was my hobby.
That sounds so nice. And I know you live in an area where there's four seasons, so to be out there walking in the winter, you're very brave.
It's quiet when there's snow on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, when did you first realize something was wrong?
Well, I really didn't think anything was wrong, or at least not terribly wrong. I had taken a workout class. It was early February. Nothing crazy, pretty routine. But the next day, I had some weakness in my right knee, and I realized that I was holding onto the handrail to go down steps. Going up steps, I was fine, but going down steps was just, it felt different, felt
Right,
weak.
right.
And then maybe a week went by, 2 weeks, and I felt sort of a weird clicking sensation in my knee. But I had absolutely no pain. So, usually you associate pain with something being wrong, but I had no pain.
Right. And so did you think like it was you twisted your knee or what did you kind of what was on your
Well, my husband is a urologist. He's not an orthopedic surgeon, but he is
right?
a urologist, and he had had his meniscus repaired a couple of years before. And if you're active and you're lucky to get old enough, you're probably going to have some kind of a knee issue at
Sure.
some
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
And I toughed it out for about 2 months, and it wasn't getting better. It wasn't getting worse, but it wasn't getting better. And I said, well, I probably better get this looked at.
I'm talking
So
about it. Yeah.
I made an appointment with the orthopedic surgeon who actually had done my husband's knee, and he we had previously lived in the same neighborhood, so I knew him somewhat. I knew him and his wife, and took a couple weeks to get in to see him, and he manipulated it, and so let's take an X-ray, and the X-ray showed sort of a shadow area around the knee, and he said, have have you had any previous knee surgery, or is there some history behind your knee?
Right.
And I go, oh, no, no. And I even jokingly said, that's not cancer, is it? And he said, oh, no. Do you have any fatigue? Do you have any, have you had any weight loss? And I'm like, no, I feel great.
Right.
And he said, well, let's get an MRI just to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's surprising that you thought that it was cancer right away and not something like, you run, you hike, not some kind of injury to the knee, but it does turn out to be bone cancer, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it's a very rare type of bone cancer, right? Talk to me about how you felt when the doctor did come back with that diagnosis. Like what was on your mind? What were you thinking?
Well, I went in a couple days later for the MRI, and I had to go back the next day to get the results of the MRI. And I immediately knew something was wrong because the surgeon was visibly shaken. And he pulled up a picture of the MRI on his computer screen, and my femur and my knee were glowing, absolutely glowing.
Right.
And the tumor had actually broken through the femur bone. I was still no pain. In fact, I went on a 3-mile hike the day before I had the MRI. I mean, that's how fine I felt.
Wow.
And he said, I don't do this kind of surgery. He says, you're going to have to see my partner. He's excellent. He's the only person in Cincinnati that does these procedures. Um, and this was a Thursday, and the soonest I could get in to see the surgeon who was going to perform my surgery was Tuesday.
Right.
And the surgeon said that the one I was seeing at the time, he said, you probably should use a cane between now and then, because I think they were very afraid that my leg was going to break
Yeah.
because of this hole in it.
Yeah.
And I had two thoughts when you get that cancer diagnosis, and the MRI, it had those awful M words, metastasis and
Right.
and
Yeah.
malignant. And my immediate thought was, my younger daughter, she's not married yet, and she hasn't had any children, and I need to see that.
Right.
That was my first thought. She is engaged, no
Oh,
children yet, but she's getting married
congratulations.
in
Yeah.
June. Super excited about that.
Yeah.
Um, But then you have just this giant cancer question. What kind of cancer? Where else might it be in my body? And what happens next?
Yeah.
And
You're
how do you?
probably worried that it was traveling, right? Like,
Oh, yes. And the type of cancer that I had, it's called leiomyosarcoma, which usually affects soft tissue, but it can affect the bone. Um, it's usually occurs in people who are much, much younger, in their 20s. So the fact that I had this type of cancer at my age, um, later down the road, I had an oncologist tell me that I was a needle in a haystack.
wow, that rare.
Um, that it was that rare. Yes.
Yeah. And so, the surgeons involved, they're putting like in a special knee or sorry, special things in your leg, like rods and whatnot into your knee, correct?
Correct. It's called a mega prosthesis,
Yeah,
and it is well, obviously they had to remove all of the cancerous bone, but they also had to remove some healthy bone because they had to attach this articulating knee, which has a rod going from the knee down into my lower leg, and another rod going up into my thigh. And they had to connect those rods to the bones that were left in my leg. They had to remove some quadricep muscle to make sure that none of the cancer had spread to the soft tissue. When they put me back together again, it's impossible because of the way this device is designed. My gastrocnemius my calf muscle could not be attached to anything. So it's non-functional. It's there, but it doesn't do anything.
mhm.
They had to permanently cut the ligaments and the tendons around the knee area. The nerves were severed. The fascia was impacted. And I fortunately I did not look into the realities of the surgery until almost a year later because I didn't want to know. Um, but I do know that they use saws and hammers. I mean, it was a pretty brutal procedure. They have to take all the bones out en masse. I say in one big chunk.
Right.
And so it was it was a pretty incredible surgery that I went through.
Yeah, and I obviously didn't hear about mega prosthesis before. I had to look it up, and it's also known as massive endoprosthesis or tumor prosthesis. And
Yes.
they actually replace a joint and a large segment of bone when they do this, like you're saying. So I can't even imagine that surgery. Like, what was the recovery like after the surgery?
Well, as as brutal as the surgery was, and as brutal as it sounds, um, I spent one night in the hospital. Um, I did not need any narcotic painkillers at all.
Incredible.
Um, I was I was able to walk. In fact, they got me up and walking that afternoon, the day of the surgery. I had to have a brace on my leg to keep it stiff, and I had to use a walker. But they had me walking up and down one time only
Yeah.
the hallway in the hospital. And I went home. My surgery was on a Friday. I went home on Saturday, which was nice because sometimes it's hard to get discharged on the weekend.
Right.
And I started physical therapy on Tuesday.
Carolyn, was there any unexpected complications or setbacks during the recovery time?
I have to say, I really don't believe I had any complications or setbacks,
Good, good.
but everything was unexpected. Um, because there really were no expectations, no benchmarks for how fast I would recover, what my end goal would be. The surgeon said that I should, at some point, he did not give me a timeline, at some point, I would be able to walk and drive and go up and down steps.
Mhm.
And that doesn't sound like a whole lot.
Right.
So that was fairly devastating to hear that, but I have exceeded those expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, you're walking now, right? And you don't use a device or anything, do you?
No, no, I don't. I I took a very long time. I I added up all of my physical therapy appointments, and it's well over 100. I went to physical therapy twice a week for 15 months. But even on the days when I wasn't going to physical therapy, I did the exercises on my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I truly think that that was the thing that has gotten me to where I am today. I've had lots of weird muscular issues and strange fuzzy feelings. My leg it's still fairly numb and may always be numb, and also super sensitive at the same time. It doesn't seem to make sense. And I have a an amazing scar, but the incision has never really hurt. I think I was very, very fortunate and had an excellent outcome. I think I had an excellent surgeon, and I think that the fact that I was active beforehand was helpful. But I was also 65. Well, when you're 65, you start to have some built-in
Yeah.
physical limitations just, because of your age.
Yeah.
Um, so lots of unexpected things, but fortunately, so far, knock on wood, no complications or setbacks.
You think they'll have to go back in again to make any kind of adjustments over time?
Oh, well, they hope not, and I hope not. I mean, it is a device. It could break. A part of it could break.
Right.
Because the device is so large, I'm at a very high infection risk. They really do not want to go in and do anything because that just increases the possibility that you might get an infection. And then they probably would have to amputate my leg. I
Yeah,
don't think they'd be able to save it.
that's what you don't want for sure. If they can see
Right.
your leg, that's what the best outcome. Listen, your friends and family, they were around. How did they react to the news? And when did they help through the recovery process with you?
You know, that's a really good question. I think everyone was universally stunned. I was stunned. It just didn't seem like it was possible. Um, many of our friends are doctors because of my husband's profession,
Yeah.
and they were stunned. Um, and my diagnosis in the beginning was really not that great, because the universal thought was this cancer has probably started somewhere else and then went to my leg.
Right.
And I think it made a lot of people, even medical professionals, somewhat uncomfortable.
Right.
Um, and my recovery process has, it's kind of, if you looked at my leg right now, you would say, oh, well, it's a little, it's a little misshapen. It doesn't look quite right, but it really doesn't look terrible.
Right.
And I think there's a misconception that, oh, I just had a knee replacement. Because that's kind of what it sounds like. But it was really a leg replacement, if you're going to call it anything. And I don't think, I think the only other group of people out there that understand what my recovery has been and how hard I've had to work have been people who have had amputations, and they've had to learn how to walk with an external prosthesis,
Yeah. Tough.
because
Yeah.
it's a totally different game.
It really
Totally different.
is. You were saying that you were pretty active. You walk, you run, you're always out and doing things outside, and then you go from that to really having to adjust your mobility a lot and learn how to walk again. How was your mental state through that? Were you able to handle that and cope with that?
No. No.
That's the that's
Um,
the that's the same answer that I get almost every time when I ask people. It's really, really hard. So go ahead and talk to me about that.
well, and anyone that knew me even remotely before my diagnosis would say I was type A. I got everything done at home, at work.
Right,
I just was a doer. And all of a sudden, after this surgery, I couldn't even get out of bed without assistance. I could not go to the bathroom by myself. I couldn't get dressed by myself. I couldn't put shoes and socks on by myself. Very, very humbling.
yeah,
And on top of that was a sense of vulnerability, because I couldn't walk out of a room. I couldn't leave our house because the only way I could get out of the house was for my husband to get a ramp built that from the inside of the house to the garage, and
right,
I would have to get in a wheelchair. He had to wheel me down the ramp. I could not walk and get the mail out of our mailbox because we have an incline in our front yard, and
right,
we live on a steep street. I couldn't even walk up the street to save my life if I had to. So you feel very vulnerable, and mentally I did two things. I wasn't aware that I was doing them, but I disassociated, and I really felt like I was watching a movie of myself,
yeah,
and that what was happening to me wasn't really happening to me. I was watching it happen to me.
right,
And I also felt as though it was a nightmare, then surely I would wake up and the nightmare would be over.
yeah,
And if I were to forget about it for a few minutes, I would remember, and it was like a punch in the gut over and over and over.
right. Yeah, I guess you would probably would have gotten frustrated, angry. Did you ever get depressed over it?
Oh, a lot of people would say that, yes. You
Yes.
know, everybody's heard of the five stages of grief. I never got angry. I still am not angry.
Okay.
Um, I do think I had some denial. That was probably my disbelief, my thinking it was a nightmare and surely this can't be happening and I'll wake up and it will be over. And I didn't do any bargaining, but I was very sad. But I think there's a difference between sadness and depression.
Hmm.
I think I was entitled to be sad. I lost a lot of ability, um, to hike, to cook, to garden, to get on the ground and play with my three beautiful, crazy grandkids.
Right.
I could not physically do those things. And I lost some friendships because if the friendships were based on certain activities and I couldn't do those activities,
Oh,
some
interesting.
of those people sort of disappeared from my life.
That's too.
Um, and I lost my identity of being a self-reliant human being, which I've always kind of felt that that was a word that described me. I'm back.
Yeah,
I'm back to being self-reliant.
but you're still.
But it was hard to feel like my entire character had changed
Yeah,
in such a short period of time.
but you still have some physical limitations, right? And with those in mind, what's the biggest challenge you face every day?
Well, I have a lot of small challenges, and I really taken together, they can kind of weigh me down, but I am so incredibly lucky. I still have my leg. It mostly does what I want it to do. It takes a lot of energy to drag this thing around.
Mhm.
Um, Sitting and standing for any longer than 20 minutes can be problematic. I will be getting up and stretching my legs in a minute during this recording because
Uh,
I just can't sit in one place for too long. So going to a restaurant is tough. Travel is tough. But last summer we did go to Iceland. The flight there about killed me, but once we got there and the swelling in my leg went down, I did okay. And actually Iceland, it was surprisingly amazing. They have fantastic restroom facilities for disabled persons.
really? Wow.
Way better than this country. Yes.
I wonder why that is. That's kind of odd, but yeah.
It was a it was a nice surprise. Yeah, a nice surprise. And the other nice thing was my handicap, my decal worked over there. It works in all the EU countries.
Oh,
And that was also kind of nice to not have to worry about parking because we were going from place to place. We drove around the entire circumference of the island,
yeah.
and it was pretty remote. But we felt very safe. So, but my lymphatic system is kind of messed up. I have to put my feet up, and my right leg is now longer than my left leg, so I have to wear a lift in my left shoe. Um, but you know what? All those things are they are it is okay. It is okay.
Right. And so would you say that there's any kind of coping mechanisms that you would recommend to other people that are going through like amputations and surgery like this?
Yes, I have two things. I had a wonderful physical therapist who understood that my body needed healing, but my mind needed healing too.
Yeah.
And he said that, I was going to could be a better person because of this, because I would have to have a mind-body connection
Yeah.
that I didn't have before, and that I would not take anything for granted.
Right.
And he was absolutely right. And I kind of adopted a mantra to myself that, and I have to say this every day. Sometimes I have to say it multiple times a day, that I try to keep my gratitude higher than my expectations.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And I cannot take credit for it. It's a phrase from a Ray Wiley Hubbard song, who I'm a great fan of his.
Okay.
He's
Okay.
he's sort of an outlaw country music guy.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that I think and it's hard. It's hard to keep that gratitude higher than your expectations. And the other thing that helped me as a person is I have let faith into my life, and that was not a big part of my life before, and it's a very big part now. And I think those two things combined is what has gotten me through it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So a lot of people I talk to anyway, come very close to death. And I think when you come out of that, you're just, so you lost a leg or whatever it might be, but you have a lot more gratitude and a different perspective on life. Um,
Absolutely.
Carolyn, are there any small victories that you can think of? And what really kept you motivated going, and doing so well that as you are?
I was it's an excellent question because my victories have changed over the last, actually tomorrow I will be 22 months out from my surgery.
Oh,
The first time I could sleep on my side as opposed to having to sleep on my back. I mean, it was just
yeah.
luxury.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Being able to get the mail from the mailbox, um, getting rid of the cane, to not to have to walk with the cane. You know, I one day, and this was probably, oh, yeah, maybe 5 months after my surgery, 6 months, I was just able to drive myself to physical therapy by myself, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I had two canes. I had two walkers. I had two canes. I kept one in my car. I kept one in the house. I accidentally drove to physical therapy without my cane. So I had to get out of the car, walk into the building, took the elevator down. I wasn't able to do stairs yet. And
Yeah.
I walked in and I was a nervous wreck because
Yeah.
I didn't have my cane.
Yeah.
And I was truly like freaking out. And I this was a big open space. There were many physical therapists there. I had worked with almost all of them. And I said, "Oh my God, guys, I forgot my cane." And they were so excited
Yeah.
because maybe it meant I didn't need it as much as I thought I meant it.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
um, I just last week, and I have continued to get stronger and stronger, and I did. I don't really journal, but I did keep track of my own progress. And last week, I was doing 120 pounds on the leg press,
oh nice.
and I only weigh 115 pounds. So that to me was, but I'm not done yet. I'm gonna get more. I don't know how much more, but I'm working on it. So
Well, no, they're all good, and it's just little increments that you're getting better and better. Well, for me, I set these little goals, and you mentioned like going out to the mailbox, for example. I couldn't do that before, and I was just walking around the house on my prosthetics, and I couldn't go much further than that. And I would walk 20 minutes, then I would walk 40 minutes, and then I'd walk 60 minutes. And finally, I got to the point where, okay, I'm going to go out to the mailbox and back. And my wife was like, no, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I went out there with my walker. I made it out to the mailbox. It's a fair distance at my place, and then back again. And I kept doing that. And then after I achieved that and I knew that I was comfortable doing that, I said to myself, I'm going to set another goal, which is not to use the walker. And it was really frightening. I got about halfway and I was like, what if I fall? I don't know how to get up really, because it's not that easy with prosthetics. But anyway, I really like how you've set those little goals and you've achieved those little wins along the way. I think that's what will get you to the point where you really need to be. Um, Support is really an important part of your healing process. And how did you find the amputee coalition? And can you talk a little bit about that community?
well, I was and I still am very anxious to find another person that has had my surgical procedure, somebody else that has a mega prosthetic leg,
Mm.
um, because I still have not found that person.
No, no.
And no, and I did through a friend of a friend. I talked to a young man who has a mega prosthesis in his arm,
Yeah,
and he is playing golf, so he had an excellent outcome as well. But the HIPAA laws in the United States make it very difficult for the doctors. They can't divulge anything. And I thought, well, maybe this amputee coalition, which I found online, if I thought, and I didn't know if they'd accept me as a member,
right,
because I'm not an amputee. I thought, well, if I thought of this group, maybe somebody else will have thought about this group.
right.
But I seem to be the only one so far. There is no mega prosthesis support group because there are, there are so few of us. We are growing in number because this surgery is now being done um, on people that don't have cancer, but maybe had a total knee and it has gone awry and they can't go back in and fix what's there. They just need to take it all out. And so it is being used for more than just oncologic purposes. Um, and when I joined the Amputee Coalition, I was overwhelmed because their stories resonated with me. And that was, I don't know why that is so helpful and valuable and part of the healing process, but it is.
Well, I think part of it is that you don't feel alone anymore, right? Um, you mentioned that you had some interest in forming, or being part of a structured support group. What would you kind of expect to get out of that? Why would you want to join a support group?
Well, it's interesting. If you had asked me that question a year ago, I would have said because I needed support. But at this point, I would like to help others that are not as far along as I am with their mega prosthetic experience. And I think that if you can talk to somebody that has experienced your suffering, you just have an immediate empathy, immediate honesty, and it goes in both directions. You know, Kevin, when you called me 2 weeks ago or so to inquire if I would be willing to do this interview, I didn't know anything about you. You knew nothing about me. But we ended up having this beautiful hour-long phone call because it was almost as though we already knew each other because we had this big shared thing
Right.
that unless you have experienced it, you don't understand it.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I started to go and do these interviews and create a support group and things like that is because I was isolated. I was like you. I didn't have anyone that I could talk to because my friends didn't understand. They would say, just put your legs on and come on, let's go. And they didn't realize how hard that is to get up and walk again, right? So
Right.
and they don't understand the emotional part of it either, what you go through when you lose your legs, when you're told that you're gonna lose your legs, or you're gonna have a surgery like yours or whatever. But it's really important to make those types of connections and talk to people that are going through the same experiences and whatnot. What's the biggest lesson you've learned through all of this?
You know, I've learned I've learned mountains. I have learned more in the last 22 months than I think I've learned in my entire life.
Hmm.
Um, One thing is I'm a lot stronger than I thought. You have to dig deep
Yeah,
when something like this happens, but you can surprise yourself. I surprised myself.
right.
Um, I now honestly know what empathy is, and I did not. I had read the definition. I had knew the difference between empathy and sympathy,
Yeah,
but now I really get it.
you feel it.
And how powerful it is to receive it and how powerful it is to give it. We sort of touched on this earlier. Big things are small, trying to, do well in your, professional life. Some of the things you thought were so big
Yeah,
now are very small, but some small things become very big.
yeah, yeah,
It changes your perspective, and you realize that every day is a gift and every step is a gift. when that's taken away from you, I think it goes back to gratitude, you know?
Yeah. And listen, this can happen to anyone, right? Like, we live our lives and things are going great. We have a good job. We're riding our bikes. We're playing with the kids. Life is just normal. And then all of a sudden, just one day, something changes, right? So
Yeah.
it's really hard from an emotional and perspective. What would you say if somebody was just found out, hey, I'm going to lose my leg, or I have cancer in my leg? What would you say to them as they're going through that process?
Well, um, I would, I have a couple things, in no particular order. Um, you're going to have some new limitations.
Yeah, just way
Um,
of life.
and yes, and you have to accept them. You have to accept those limitations, even if others don't.
Yeah,
Um, you have to be kind to yourself. You have to be gentle to yourself, but you also need to push yourself.
yeah,
And some days it's hard to find that balance. Um, I sort of kept track of my progress, and I think that has been very, very valuable because on a day-to-day comparison, you feel like you're maybe not doing so much,
right.
but weekly, monthly, 6 months,
Yeah,
it's been really reaffirming for me to be able to go back and say, "Oh my God, this is how I felt 4 months ago, and
yeah,
now I can go to the grocery store and I
yeah,
can go back in the corner and get all the dairy products. I don't have to worry about, walking those extra steps."
yeah. It
Um,
goes back to you setting those little goals, and although they don't seem like they're that much when you're doing them, but over time, and as you increase them and you see the progress, that's where it's really neat to look back and say, before I couldn't even stand up off the couch.
right.
Here I am now walking, over to the neighbor's house or whatever it might be. So, yeah,
I would also tell someone that whether you think you need it or not, you probably need a mental health expert. You probably need somebody to talk to that's not a family member, where you can have a safe conversation and not be judged. And me personally, I have been seeing I did not get that help early enough. I waited a year, and I that was a big mistake.
right.
Um, but I'm now seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist. My husband and I go to the therapist together. And one of the first questions the psychiatrist asked me was, well, where do you see yourself in 6 months?
Mm,
And I realized that I wasn't thinking 6 months out.
right.
And I needed to start looking forward. Um, I also think that when you go through a physical change, like what you went through, Kevin, what I went through, is you really need to embrace physical therapy.
Yeah.
Um, it's just going to be a part of your life for the rest of your life. And you need to and you can't just focus on one part of your body. You need to work on your balance, you need to work on your
Everything.
core,
Yeah.
everything, because it's all connected.
Yeah, I was surprised how much energy, how much muscle it takes. Um, and working with the physical therapist has really come a long way because you think that you still have power in your legs, but when you try to stand up from a chair with no legs or go upstairs, a flight of stairs, it takes a lot of energy. And if you don't have that core muscle, you don't have the balance, you don't have the endurance. So it's really, really important. Going back to what you said about getting help, um, and talking with somebody, I think that is really good advice. And the reason why I say that, and I would even say that people should consider that anyway, regardless of what they're going through. Mental health is a really challenging, complex piece of our lives. And if you don't have people to talk to, that you can trust and, just kind of get things off your chest, it can really pile up on you and surprise you. That's what I felt anyway. And after I got help, and I see my psychotherapist once a week, once every 2 weeks usually. And we just talk about, what I'm going through and how I'm feeling. And after I go out of there, I just feel like I can win the world over. It's a good feeling. I think a lot of people should consider it. Anything else you want to add to the conversation before we kind of wrap up, Carolyn?
Well, maybe one thing is for a very, very long time, and this is also something that I think only an amputee could relate to. I had to relearn how to walk,
Right.
um, like from scratch. And for a very long time, I literally could not walk and talk at the same time because I had to think about what all of my muscles were doing, not only in my surgical leg, but in my non-surgical leg. And I would try to copy my surgical leg, make it do what the non-surgical leg was doing, but they both felt different and they still feel different. But I can walk and talk now. It took me a long time to get there. Um, but anyway, I just
Yeah. Yeah, some people that don't understand if they haven't gone through this, you're starting from square one to learn to walk and get your balance down and things like that. So, yeah.
right.
Carolyn, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think a lot of people will benefit from hearing this, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. And I do hope that if anyone out there listening has a mega prosthesis or they're going to get a mega prosthesis, I would be more than happy to talk to that person. So thanks, Kevin, very
Yeah, we're
much.
we're gonna find you somebody, Carolyn. We're gonna find you. All right, well, thanks again.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Kevin.
Carolyn, your story is a testament of resilience and adaptation. You've shown that even in the face of life-altering medical conditions, there is a way forward. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. To our listeners, if you're faced with your own challenges, whether it's limb loss, a medical setback, or any life-changing event, remember Carolyn's story. You are not alone. There is a community out there that is ready to support you and uplift you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to The Next Step and share this podcast with someone that might benefit from it. You can also follow us on social media for more inspiring stories. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, every step forward, no matter how big or small, is a step worth celebrating. See you next time on The Next Step.